All right, welcome to this explainer. Today, we're diving headfirst into the dramatic, fascinating, and honestly brutal history of the Soviet Union from 1917 to 1939. Whether you're gearing up for your junior cert history revision or you just want to wrap your head around the key players of this era, you are in the right place. Let's get into it.
So let's kick things off with a massive question, one that historians have been arguing about for decades. How on earth did a background paperwork guy, someone totally underestimated by everyone around him, manage to seize absolute control over the world's largest country? It's literally one of the most wild political takeovers in human history. Here's our roadmap for today. We'll start with the shift from the Tsar to Lenin, look at the intense struggle for power, break down the new Soviet economy, examine the machinery of state terror, and finally look at what everyday life was actually like under Stalin.
Okay, Section 1. From Tsar to Lenin in the sheer chaos of 1917.
Look, to understand Stalin, we absolutely have to understand the total collapse that birthed the Soviet state in the first place. Early 1917, Russia is ruled by Tsar Nicholas II, an absolute monarch. But mix extreme poverty with massive military defeats in World War I, and the country just breaks. By March, the Tsar is forced to step down. A provisional government takes over, but they make a completely fatal mistake. They stay in the war. This creates a massive political vacuum, which leads right into a swift revolution in November. A brutal civil war follows, eventually creating the world's first communist state. Just before its founder dies in 1924.
Enter the Bolsheviks. This is a crucial term for your notes. Led by Vladimir Lenin, they capitalized on all that 1917 chaos. How? By winning over the working class and soldiers with a brilliantly simple promise: peace, land, and bread. That's it. They stormed the Winter Palace and took control. But keep this in the back of your mind. While the Bolsheviks won the civil war that followed, Lenin dying in 1924 left a huge, very dangerous power vacuum at the very top.
Moving on to Section 2, the struggle for power. Honestly, this plays out like the ultimate political thriller.
You see, the fight to replace Lenin didn't happen out on a battlefield. It was a high-stakes clash of personalities right inside the Communist Party. It basically boiled down to fire versus ice. On one side, Leon Trotsky. He's the fire, flamboyant, brilliant speaker, the literal hero of the Civil War. He believed in permanent revolution, spreading communism globally. On the flip side, Joseph Stalin, the ice, quiet, working in the shadows. His rivals actually made fun of him, calling him Comrade Card Index. Stalin's pitch was socialism in one country. Basically, let's make the USSR strong first. Now on paper, Trotsky should have easily won, but he was totally outmaneuvered by Stalin, the guy everyone severely underestimated.
So how did he actually pull it off? Through a brilliantly boring-sounding job, general secretary. It sounds administrative, right? But Stalin realized something absolutely crucial. This job let him control the power of patronage. He was the one deciding who got promoted and who got jobs. Over time, he quietly packed the party with loyalists who owed him their entire careers. So when it came time to vote on any big policy, guess what? Stalin always had a built-in majority.
Now here's the wild part. Lenin actually tried to warn everyone before he died. He wrote this secret political will known as his testament. Listen to this. Stalin is too rude. I suggest that the comrades think about a way of removing Stalin from that post. I mean, if that had been read publicly, Stalin's career would have been instantly over. But his rivals, guys like Kamenev and Zinoviev, they hated Trotsky so much that they decided to protect Stalin and keep the document a secret. It was a massive miscalculation, and it eventually cost them their lives.
Stalin's path to victory was an absolute masterclass in divide and conquer. Step 1, isolate the left. He literally tricked Trotsky into missing Lenin's funeral by giving him the wrong date, which made Trotsky look incredibly disrespectful to the country. Step 2, turn on the left. Stalin teams up with right-wing party members to vote Trotsky out entirely. And step 3, crush the right. Once Trotsky's out of the picture, Stalin immediately ditches his right-wing allies, steals the radical policies for himself, and kicks them out too. By 1929, Trotsky is exiled, and Stalin is the absolute, undisputed dictator.
Section 3. Changing the Soviet economy. Dragging Russia into the modern age.
All right, so Stalin is now the boss. He knows he has to modernize the USSR fast, warning that they were 50 to 100 years behind the West. So he launches a brutal command economy, meaning the government makes every single economic decision to force industrialization. The tool for this? The 5-year plans. Run by an agency called Gosplan, they set impossibly high targets for heavy industry. We're talking coal, iron, steel.
Things people actually needed daily, like clothes or furniture, were completely ignored. To get this done, they rewarded record-breaking workers, calling them Stakhanovites. And economically, it worked. By 1941, the USSR was the second largest industrial power on Earth. But the human cost? Horrific. These massive projects were built using millions of slave laborers working in freezing, lethal conditions just to hit those targets.
But to feed all those millions of new factory workers, Stalin needed total control of the countryside. He did this through a policy called collectivization. This meant forcing millions of small, private peasant farms to merge into massive, state-owned mega-farms called kolkhozy. He essentially declared war on his own peasants. When they fought back by burning crops and killing their own livestock, Stalin blamed the wealthier peasants, calling them kulaks, and ordered them liquidated as a class. Millions were arrested, shot, or deported to Siberia.
By 1936, a staggering 90% of Soviet farmland was collectivized. But all that chaos, combined with the state literally taking grain at gunpoint, triggered a massive man-made famine. The hardest hit was Ukraine, where almost 4 million people starved to death in a tragedy known as the Holodomor. Stalin got the grain he wanted, but the cost in human lives is just beyond comprehension.
Okay, Section 4. State terror and control, also known as the Great Purges.
You'd think having total economic control would be enough, right? Nope, Stalin was incredibly paranoid. In 1934, a popular party leader named Sergei Kirov was assassinated, and Stalin used this as the perfect excuse to claim a massive underground conspiracy was out to get him. He unleashed unprecedented state terror. To crush any potential rivals, he set up these elaborate show trials. These were pure theater in Moscow. The verdicts were decided before the trial even began. Old heroes of the 1917 revolution were broken by torture, paraded in front of global journalists, and forced to confess to completely absurd crimes, like spying for Nazi Germany. Then, they were executed. The psychological message was terrifying. If the founders of the revolution aren't safe, literally nobody is.
The actual muscle behind all this terror was the NKVD, the secret police. And get this, they operated on literal bureaucratic quotas. Regions were handed a spreadsheet telling them exactly how many traitors they needed to arrest. To hit those numbers, they tortured innocent people into signing false confessions. The purges swept up intellectuals, factory managers, average citizens, and, in a move of pure paranoia, roughly half of the entire army's officer corps. He left his own military completely leaderless right on the verge of World War II.
But terror is really only half the equation here. The other half was absolute mind control through a cult of personality. The state owned all the media, using censorship and propaganda to turn Stalin into a living god. They literally rewrote history books. People who were executed were airbrushed out of old photographs. They became unpersons. At the same time, streets and entire cities were renamed after Stalin, and the daily papers praised him as the brilliant genius of humanity.
On to our final section, Section 5, Everyday Life Under Stalin, Society and Mind Control. Because totalitarianism isn't just about high-level politics, it's about social engineering. What was it actually like to live in this system every day? Well, the state dictated everything. Worried about falling birth rates, Stalin reversed older, progressive communist laws in what's called the Great Retreat, banning abortion and making divorce incredibly hard. Women faced a massive double burden. While they made up over 40% of industrial workers, they were still expected to do all the cooking and cleaning at home. For kids, the state brainwashed them through the Komsomol, a very strict youth union that you basically had to join if you wanted a decent job later. They were even encouraged to inform on their own parents. And finally, religion was fiercely attacked. Churches were blown up, and thousands of priests were shipped off to the Gulag prison camps.
As we wrap things up, we really have to pause on this single number, 20 million. It represents the staggering, horrific human toll of Stalin's regime. An estimated 20 million Soviet citizens lost their lives to political executions, slave labor in the freezing gulags, and devastating man-made famines. And that leaves us with a massive paradox to chew on. Stalin successfully built the industrial machine that allowed the Soviet Union to withstand and ultimately defeat Nazi Germany, transforming Russia into a global superpower, but the cost was the destruction of millions of innocent lives. How do we reconcile a leader who modernized a nation to save it from foreign destruction, while at the exact same time becoming one of the greatest destroyers of his own people in human history? I'm going to leave you with that thought. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer, and keep questioning history.